I never imagined that inheriting my grandfather's farm would put me on the front lines of a battle I never asked for. Life out here had always been quiet, just the way I liked it. 500 acres of rolling fields, a few dozen head of cattle grazing peacefully, the scent of wildflowers carried on the breeze. Every morning, I woke up to the gentle sounds of the countryside, roosters crowing in the distance, the rhythmic creak of the old windmill, the soft rustle of leaves stirred by the wind. For a man like me, who'd spent his younger years deployed overseas, there was something healing in the simplicity of it all. Out here, it was just me, my land, and the kind of peace you couldn't put a price on. I spent my days tending to the livestock, mending fences, and planning improvements to the irrigation system my grandfather had cobbled together decades ago. Evenings were reserved for watching the sunset from the porch, a cold beer in hand, boots propped on the railing. No deadlines, no supervisors breathing down my neck, no one telling me how to live. Just open sky and soil that belonged to me, legally, officially, and in every sense that mattered. The farm wasn't just property, it was legacy. My grandfather had worked this land with his bare hands, and now it was my turn to carry the torch. The nearest town was a few miles down the road, and though the edge of my property bordered a small HOA-run community, I'd never had any dealings with them. Their rules didn't apply to me, and I liked it that way. That peace shattered the day a pickup truck kicked up dust down my long gravel driveway. I watched from the porch as it rolled to a stop near the gate. Out climbed a woman, maybe in her 50s, short, stout, wearing a baseball cap emblazoned with "We the People" across the front. She carried an American flag on a wooden pole in one hand and a thick folder of papers in the other. Even from a distance, I could sense the determination radiating off her. She marched right up to the gate, planted the flag in the dirt like she was claiming new territory, and shouted across the yard, "You there! Hey, you! Are you the owner of this land?" I stepped off the porch, wiping my hands on my jeans as I approached. "I am," I replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" She straightened her spine, puffed out her chest, and announced with absolute certainty, "I'm Karen McNeil. This land is mine by blood and birthright. Your grandfather stole it from my family generations ago. You're trespassing on my ancestral property." I blinked, stunned for a moment, then gave a short laugh, thinking it had to be some kind of joke. "I think there's a misunderstanding," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've got the deed, title, inheritance papers, you name it. This land's been in my family for over 70 years. Karen waved her folder at me like it was holy scripture. "I've got proof from the original sovereign land claims, the real court of the people. Your government papers mean nothing. I'm a sovereign citizen under common law jurisdiction, and I'm here to reclaim what's rightfully mine." I stared at her, feeling a slow burn rising in my chest. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "whatever you believe, I own this land legally. You're welcome to leave before this turns into something it doesn't need to be." But Karen wasn't backing down. She pulled a thick document from her folder, covered in stamps and strange seals, and handed it through the gate. "Here's my declaration of land reclamation, recognized by the Royal Court of the Free State of America. You've been served." I didn't take the paper. "Lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but you're trespassing. I suggest you turn around and head home." Karen smirked, picked up her flag, and climbed back into her truck. "This ain't over, boy. You'll be hearing from me and from my people." With that, she revved the engine, spun the wheels, and sped off down the drive, leaving a swirling cloud of dust behind. I stood there, watching the dust settle, heart thudding a little harder than I'd like to admit. I'd thought my biggest worry this week was a leaky water trough. But now Now I had a whole new kind of storm rolling in. It had been 2 days since Karen's bizarre declaration, and for a while, I let myself believe maybe that was the end of it. Maybe she'd gotten it out of her system, just another fringe nutcase passing through. But deep down, something told me she wasn't finished. That uneasy hunch was confirmed when I came back from the farmer's market early Saturday morning, hauling sacks of feed in the back of my truck. As I turned off the county road onto my driveway, I slammed the brakes and stared. My gate was chained shut. A heavy chain, looped multiple times through the metal bars, secured with a massive padlock that wasn't mine. But that wasn't the worst of it. Hanging from the chain was a crudely painted wooden sign. The letters scrawled in thick black paint. Warning. Property of Karen McNeil. By hereditary right. Trespassers will be prosecuted under common law. I sat there for a full 10 seconds, engine idling, trying to process the sheer audacity. Beyond the gate, I spotted a small setup, a faded camper trailer parked off to the side, a folding table set up beneath a makeshift canopy, and a yellow "Don't Tread on Me" flag fluttering in the breeze. And there she was, Karen, sitting comfortably in a lawn chair by a smoking fire pit, sipping from a mason jar like she'd been here her whole life. 2 men lounged beside her, bearded, in camo jackets, their eyes shaded by mirrored sunglasses. They looked like they belonged to some backwoods militia recruitment ad. I killed the engine, climbed out, and strode up to the gate, gripping the bars tight. "Karen!" I called, my voice steady but sharp. "Take this chain off, right now." She stood slowly, raising her mason jar in a mock toast. "I told you I'd be back," she said, smiling like a cat who'd cornered a mouse. "And I'm here, exercising my rightful claim. This land's been under McNeil's stewardship for generations. I'm just reclaiming what's ours." "You're trespassing," I snapped. "You're blocking my property. Remove this lock, or I'll call the sheriff." One of the men laughed dryly. "Ain't no sheriff got authority here, friend," he drawled. "This is sovereign territory now." I clenched my jaw. "That's not how the law works." Karen pulled a thick folder from the table, flipping it open theatrically. "We've filed the reclamation paperwork with the Royal Court of the Free State. This chain is lawful notice. You're prohibited from entering without our consent." I rubbed my forehead, feeling frustration creep into my bones. "Karen, there is no Royal Court of the Free State. That's not a thing. This is county land, governed by state and federal law. You're committing a crime." She grinned wider. "We don't recognize your corporate laws, boy. Only natural law. You're on sovereign soil now." Behind her, one of the men adjusted a small camera on a tripod, angling it toward me. "Smile for the record," he said smugly. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the sheriff's number. "I'm not playing this game. I'm calling law enforcement." Karen waved dismissively. "Call whoever you like. We'll film it. We'll take it to the people's court. We'll expose the injustice." I turned my back on them, walking a few steps away to make the call. The dispatcher promised to send deputies. As I hung up, I glanced back to see Karen waving at the camera, calling me a corporate puppet, loud enough for the microphone to catch. An hour later, 2 deputies arrived in cruisers, stepping cautiously out as they took in the scene. I explained everything: how the chain wasn't mine, how they'd set up camp just beyond the gate, how they claimed sovereignty over my land. The deputies approached the gate. "Ma'am," one said, hands resting on his belt, "you're not allowed to block this entrance. This isn't your property." Karen stepped forward, planting her feet like a stubborn mule. "This is sovereign territory. You don't have jurisdiction here." The deputies exchanged glances. "Ma'am, unless you're on his side of the property line, we can't remove you without a court order. But you're not allowed to interfere with access. That's criminal trespass. Karen handed them a copy of her so-called declaration. Here's your jurisdiction, officer. Read it and weep. They barely glanced at the nonsense papers. We'll note this for the report, but we're not authorized to cut the chain today without a court order, one deputy said, voice heavy with resignation. You'll need to take this to civil court, sir. I felt my stomach twist with frustration. So what? You're telling me she can block me from my own damn property, and I just have to file paperwork? The deputy sighed. Unfortunately, yeah. Unless she steps foot inside your boundary line, it's a civil matter. I stared at them, then at Karen, who stood there triumphant, raising her flag high over the gate. You're not coming in until the land's rightfully restored, she called gleefully. I clenched my fists, knowing full well that escalating would only hurt my case. Fine, I muttered. You want to play games? We'll play, but I'll win. As the deputies left, Karen's camera kept rolling, her voice narrating loudly about tyranny and resistance. I turned, walking back to my truck, my mind already working 10 steps ahead. 2 mornings later, I woke up to chaos. The distant bellowing of cows jolted me upright before the sun had even crested the hills. I threw on my boots and hurried outside, blinking against the early light. My stomach dropped at the sight. The pasture gate was wide open, and a dozen of my cattle were wandering down the gravel drive, some already nosing toward the county road. What the hell? I muttered, sprinting toward the fence line. That's when I saw it. The barbed wire fence along the north side, cut clean through. Wire curled uselessly against the dirt. The fence posts leaning at odd angles like broken bones. And just beyond that breach, across the field, I spotted a second camp. Karen. Her camper had been pulled inside the property now, parked next to the old hay barn. A new sign hung from the barn door, painted hastily in red and white. Temple of the Free Nation of Karen. I stood frozen for a beat, my brain refusing to catch up. Around the makeshift camp, her 2 bearded companions were stacking stones into strange circular patterns, one of them swinging a hammer against a fence post like they were building something. A fire pit smoked in the dirt. Someone had strung up another "Don't Tread on Me" flag between the barn and a tractor. I stormed toward them, boots crunching across the grass, heart pounding. "Karen!" I shouted. "You broke my fence! You let my cattle loose! You're trespassing! Inside my damn property!" Karen appeared from behind the camper, holding a clipboard like it was a royal scepter. "This land has been liberated," she declared, arms spread wide. "You're witnessing the restoration of rightful sovereignty. We've reclaimed the ancestral territory." The fence was a symbol of colonial oppression. I ran a hand down my face, fighting the urge to scream. "You destroyed my fence. You're illegally inside my property. You can't just reclaim private land." One of the men raised a phone, filming me as Karen stepped closer, her face alight with missionary fervor. "We've invoked Article 7 of the People's Charter of Sovereign Restoration. This is now recognized sacred territory under common law jurisdiction." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking with frustration, and dialed the sheriff's office again. "They've broken in," I told the dispatcher. "They've cut my fence, set up camp inside my land. They've let my cattle loose. I need deputies out here now." As I hung up, Karen raised her arms skyward. "The corporate puppet's calling his masters again. They'll come, but they'll have no authority here. The people stand free." The deputies arrived faster this time. 3 cruisers pulling up at the gate. They crossed the broken fence line, eyes scanning the bizarre scene. "Jesus Christ," one muttered under his breath. I explained everything, pointing out the cut fence, the loose cattle, the unauthorized structures. Karen approached the deputies, handing them copies of her fake court documents, her voice rising with every word. "You have no jurisdiction. This is sovereign territory. Your badges are invalid here." The deputies listened patiently, then turned to me. "We'll write this up, but unless they commit a crime beyond trespassing or damage, we can't forcibly remove them today without a court order. It's a civil issue." My jaw clenched. "They cut my fence. That's damage." One deputy nodded. "We'll note it. You can press charges for property damage, but removal's still going to need an order." Karen beamed like she'd won a prize. "See? They can't touch us. The free nation stands." I looked at the deputies, at Karen, at the bizarre stone symbols forming in my pasture. "I'll see you in court," I said quietly. Karen's camera rolled as she shouted after me, "Bring it on, trespasser! The land will be freed." I turned away, fury bubbling beneath my skin, already thinking of the next move. I thought things couldn't possibly get worse. I was wrong. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop before I even finished my coffee. Texts, voicemails, missed calls, from neighbors, old army buddies, even the feed store clerk. "Hey man, saw you on the news. What's going on out there? Dude, check Channel 7. I switched on the TV and there it was. A grainy aerial shot of my farm, complete with a close-up of Karen's makeshift camp beside the barn. The local news anchor spoke in a tone usually reserved for house fires and tornadoes. An unusual land dispute unfolding in Westfield County today, as a self-proclaimed sovereign citizen claims ancestral ownership of a local farm. Tensions have escalated between the alleged rightful owner and the current resident, leading to legal uncertainty and community debate. Then came the kicker, a full interview with Karen herself, standing proudly beside her camper, flanked by the "Don't tread on me" flag snapping in the wind. "This land was stolen from my great-great-grandfather," she declared to the camera. "I'm here to reclaim what's ours. We're peaceful, but we won't leave until justice is served." I stared at the screen, disbelief turning into anger. "Peaceful?" I muttered. "You cut my fence. You let my cows loose." By noon, it wasn't just the news. My inbox flooded with Facebook notifications. Karen had started a group. "Return the McNeil family land," complete with blurry cell phone photos of her camp, a lengthy manifesto about land sovereignty and freedom from corporate tyranny, and a donation link. Hundreds of people had joined in hours. Strangers commented things like, "Stand strong, Karen," and "Property rights are a lie of the state." Some posts tagged me by name, accusing me of being a land thief and corporate enforcer. I even got a few direct messages, some angry, some just weird. I walked outside to clear my head, only to find a flyer stuck in my mailbox. "Free the land. Support Karen's struggle. Join the rally Saturday." A rally? I looked down the road. Sure enough, a small group of people stood at the fence line, waving signs, holding flags, some filming themselves for social media. One guy had a bullhorn. "You can't hide behind fake laws, Blake," he shouted toward the house. "The people see you." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just some backyard stunt anymore. It was spiraling. I called my lawyer, pacing across the porch. "Gina, it's getting worse. They're organizing. There's a damn rally planned." The news ran a whole piece like this is some historic civil rights fight. Gina sighed on the other end. "I saw it. I'm already drafting a cease and desist. We need a judge's injunction before this turns into a circus." "A circus?" I laughed bitterly. "It's already a 3-ring show." "Stay calm, Ethan," she said firmly. "They're trying to provoke you. Document everything. Don't confront them directly. I'll file first thing Monday." That night, I installed extra cameras around the property. As I checked the feeds on my phone, another notification popped up. A new post in Karen's group. The people will reclaim the land. The rally will be historic. Stay tuned. My gut twisted. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I barely had time to catch my breath before the next punch landed. Monday morning, as promised, Gina filed for an injunction. But before we could even get a hearing date, I opened my mailbox to find a thick envelope stamped with the county court seal. A summons. I tore it open on the porch, my hands trembling just a little, not with fear, but pure, stunned disbelief. Karen had officially filed a lawsuit. She was suing me for unlawful occupation of ancestral sovereign land and seeking full transfer of the property's deed. I sat down heavily on the porch steps, flipping through the attached documents, pages of rambling, barely coherent claims. Her filing included scanned copies of strange certificates, stamped with seals from something called the Royal Court of the Free State of America. There were charts, handwritten notes, and even a crude family tree claiming lineage back to colonial. Settlers, Gina called as I was still reading. I just saw the court docket, she said. Karen filed a Pro C claim. It's wild. Wild? I snorted. Gina, she's using documents that look like she printed them off a conspiracy website. I've seen worse, Gina said dryly. Still, we have to respond formally. The court has to process even nonsense claims. We'll file a motion to dismiss. 2 weeks later, we stood before a judge for the preliminary hearing. Karen represented herself, striding into the courtroom carrying a massive binder and wearing a shirt that read, "I do not consent," in bold block letters. She refused to rise when the judge entered, instead loudly declaring, "I do not recognize this corporate tribunal." The judge gave her a weary look. "Ms. McNeil, you are required to follow courtroom procedures. Please stand." Karen crossed her arms. "I stand under common law, not maritime jurisdiction." I could practically hear Gina's teeth grinding next to me. The judge sighed. "Let the record show the plaintiff refuses to comply. Proceed." Karen spent the next 20 minutes flipping through her binder, reading random passages from the Constitution, citing obscure historical documents, and waving copies of her sovereign certificates, like they were binding contracts. "This land is mine by natural law and divine inheritance," she proclaimed. "This man is a tenant of a fraudulent corporate state." When it was our turn, Gina calmly handed over our evidence packet. The deed, title history, tax records, satellite images showing the property line, and affidavits from the county recorder's office. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss this case as frivolous. The plaintiff presents no legal claim recognized under state or federal law." Karen slammed her hand on the table. "Objection! This is not corporate law. This is people's law. The corporate court cannot rule on sovereign land." The judge pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ms. McNeil, this court operates under the laws of this state and the United States. Your filings reference entities and doctrines with no legal standing." Karen launched into another tirade, quoting the Magna Carta, tossing in Latin phrases, and at one point accusing the judge of treason against natural rights. Finally, the judge banged his gavel. "Enough! Ms. McNeil, I'm warning you. Continued disruption will result in a contempt charge." Karen glared defiantly. "I don't consent to your jurisdiction." The judge looked over at Gina and me. "I will take the motion under advisement. You'll receive a ruling within the week." We left the courtroom in tense silence. Outside, Karen's supporters had gathered with signs, chanting slogans about freedom and tyranny. Karen exited to cheers, raising both fists triumphantly like she'd won a battle. Gina turned to me with a grim smile. It's not over yet, but that judge has patience I don't envy. I looked back at the courthouse doors, watching Karen bask in the crowd's adoration. She really believes she's going to win, I murmured. Gina's eyes narrowed. Belief doesn't win lawsuits, Ethan. Facts do. I just hoped the facts would be enough. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. I thought the courtroom circus was as far as Karen would go. But I underestimated her. It was well past midnight when the alarm jolted me awake. The shrill wail of the security system echoed through the farmhouse, vibrating in my chest. My phone buzzed furiously beside the bed. Motion detected, cameras triggered. I grabbed it, heart racing as I swiped open the feed. The barn door was swinging wide open. Shadows moved across the yard. Figures, 4 of them, clad in dark clothes, hauling bags, pushing a dolly stacked with equipment. One of them carried a crowbar. I shot out of bed, pulling on boots and grabbing the shotgun from the closet. Not to use, but to have. I wasn't about to get reckless, but I wasn't going out there empty-handed either. I locked the bedroom door behind me and dialed the sheriff's office with shaking fingers. "They're back," I told the dispatcher, voice tight. "They've broken into the barn. They're inside the property, hauling things out. I need deputies here now." As I spoke, Karen's voice rang out clear over the cameras. She was standing on the porch, facing the camera directly, a crazed gleam in her eyes. "We're reclaiming what's ours. The land, the tools, the livestock. It all belongs to the free nation. We're repossessing stolen property." I watched in disbelief as 2 of her men loaded a feed cart with tools from the barn. Another dragged a generator across the dirt. Someone else tried to pry open the shed near the tractor. Inside, the security lights flared on, flooding the yard in harsh white beams. Karen didn't flinch. She raised a laminated sign in front of the camera. "Notice of repossession under sovereign authority," scrawled in red marker across official-looking seals. The phone at my ear crackled. "Deputies are en route," the dispatcher said. "Stay inside. Do not engage." I swallowed hard, adrenaline thrumming under my skin. Copy that. From the window, I watched as Karen and her crew fanned out across the yard, moving with purpose, like they were conducting an official operation. One of them hammered another sign onto the fence. "This land has been liberated from corporate occupation." Then Karen banged on the front door. "Ethan," she shouted, "I know you're in there. You've got 30 minutes to vacate, or we'll reclaim the house, too." I stepped back from the window, pulse hammering in my throat. She was serious. She really thought she could take the house by force. The sirens came before the blue and red lights. 3 patrol cars barreled down the drive, tires skidding to a stop. Deputies spilled out, hands on holsters, flashlights sweeping the yard. "Sheriff's Department," one barked. "Drop what you're holding. Hands in the air." Karen spun toward them, throwing her arms wide. "You have no authority here. You're agents of the corporate state. This is sovereign land." Her men froze, tools in hand. One tried to bolt toward the fence, only to be tackled by a deputy. Another dropped the crowbar and raised his hands. Karen stood her ground, defiantly waving her sign. "You're trespassing on free soil," she yelled. "I don't consent to your jurisdiction." The deputies moved in swiftly, cuffing the 2 men without incident. 2 others hung back, watching Karen warily. "Ma'am," one deputy said calmly, "you're under arrest for trespassing, breaking and entering, vandalism, and theft." Karen laughed bitterly. "Arrest me? You can't arrest me. I'm not under your laws." The deputy gently took her by the arm. "Ma'am, please don't resist." She didn't fight. But as they led her toward the cruiser, She called out over her shoulder to the camera that was still recording on a tripod near the porch. "This isn't over. The people will rise. This is just the beginning." I stood at the window, watching as they loaded her and her crew into the squad cars. The flashing lights illuminated the yard, tools scattered, the fence broken, my belongings half loaded into the feed cart. The deputy in charge came up to the porch after they were gone. "We'll need you to catalog what was damaged or taken," he told me. "They'll be facing multiple charges." I nodded numbly. "I'll get it done." As the last cruiser disappeared down the drive, silence fell over the farm again. But it wasn't peaceful. Not anymore. It took weeks to get a court date. Weeks of picking up the pieces, repairing fences, replacing stolen tools, and answering endless questions from reporters who still hovered around like vultures looking for scraps. But the day finally came. The day Karen would stand trial for everything she'd done. The courthouse was packed when I arrived. Somehow, despite the charges, Karen had managed to turn her arrest into a rallying cry. Her supporters stood outside with homemade signs. "Free Karen! Sovereign, not subject. Corporate courts are fraud." I pushed past them, ignoring the glares and shouts. I was here for one thing: closure. Inside the courtroom, Karen sat at the plaintiff's table alone. She'd refused a lawyer, choosing to represent herself. She wore a blazer over a t-shirt that read, "I do not consent." Her hair pulled back tightly. Stacks of binders surrounded her, filled with the same nonsense documents she'd been waving since day one. When the judge entered, everyone rose, except Karen. "I do not recognize the authority of this court," she announced loudly. The judge gave her a tired look. "Noted," he said flatly. The prosecutor laid out the charges: trespassing, vandalism, theft, breaking and entering, and contempt of court from the previous hearing. Evidence was presented: security footage from the night of the break-in, photos of the damage, sworn statements from the deputies, and the stolen property recovered from her camper. When it was Karen's turn, she stood, arms raised, and declared, "I am a free woman of the sovereign land known as the McNeil Territory. This court has no lawful jurisdiction over me. I reject all charges under corporate maritime law." The judge sighed deeply. "Ms. McNeil, this is a court of law operating under the laws of this state and country. Your claims have no legal basis. You are required to defend yourself on the charges presented." Karen ignored him, flipping open a binder and launching into a rambling speech about the Magna Carta, natural law, and a series of obscure Latin phrases I didn't understand. At one point, she called the judge an agent of the Crown and accused the prosecutor of fraudulent representation of corporate interests. I glanced at Gina beside me, who shook her head slowly. "This judge has the patience of a saint," she whispered. After nearly an hour of Karen's disruptive diatribe, the judge had enough. He banged his gavel sharply. "Ms. McNeil, I am holding you in contempt of court. Bailiffs, remove her from the courtroom." Karen was escorted out, still shouting about her rights being violated. The rest of the trial moved swiftly. The evidence was overwhelming. Her own videos, posted online, showed her breaking into the barn, stealing equipment, hammering signs onto my property. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence was firm: 2.5 years in prison for Karen, probation for her 2 accomplices, and an order to pay restitution for the damage she'd caused: fencing, tools, structural repairs. As the gavel fell, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that it was over. Sadness that it had come to this. Outside the courthouse, Karen's supporters had thinned, their chants quieter now. Some still held signs, but most just stood silently as the police van pulled away with her inside. Gina clapped me on the shoulder. "It's done," she said softly. "She can't touch you anymore." I nodded, watching the van disappear down the street. Let's hope it stays that way. It took months to put everything back together. Even after the trial was over, the land still bore the scars of what Karen and her followers had done. But little by little, piece by piece, the farm healed. The first thing I did was rebuild the fence. Stronger this time. Steel posts sunk deeper, reinforced with concrete. Every inch topped with new wire, tighter than before. I installed a motion sensor system tied into the cameras, with alerts sent straight to my phone. No one would be cutting through my fences again without me knowing. Above the main gate, I hung a new sign. Big, bold letters on solid wood. Private property, not subject to sovereign citizens. It wasn't just for Karen. It was for anyone who thought they could twist reality into their own delusion. That fall, I threw a barbecue. Not because I felt like celebrating, I wasn't the partying type, but because I needed to remind myself that this land was mine, that it was still home, still standing. I invited friends from town, some neighbors, even the sheriff's deputies who'd helped me through the worst of it. Gina came too, handing me a copy of the final court order sealed in an envelope. "You're officially free and clear," she said, smiling. "No more claims, no more nonsense." We ate under the setting sun, laughter mixing with the sounds of cows lowing in the distance, the crackle of the fire pit. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace again. The news stations moved on to other stories. Karen's supporters faded away, their Facebook groups slowly dying off without their leader. She'd been moved to a state prison out east. Every now and then, I'd get a random email from someone still clinging to the Free Karen cause, but they grew fewer and far between. One chilly evening, I sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap, staring out over the fields my grandfather had once worked, and I started writing. A story. My story. Maybe it'd be a book someday, maybe just something for me. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wanted other folks to know that you can stand your ground, that you can fight back, even when the enemy isn't logical, even when they twist every truth, every law, every fact. And as the last light faded over the hills, I leaned back in my chair, boots crossed on the railing, and let out a long, steady breath. The land was quiet again. My land. And for the first time in a long time, that quiet wasn't filled with tension or dread. It was just peace. And that was worth every damn fight.